Hey there, my name is Brighton. Welcome back to another midweek video. I'm here with Pastor Rob, who gave this past week's message as we're going through our Not Our Home series in 1 Peter. This one was titled God's Game Plan for Holiness, as we wrap up the first chapter of 1 Peter, verses 13 through 25. So thanks, Pastor Rob, for being here again.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, great to have you. So I want to kind of start with the title.
Yeah.
God's Game Plan for Holiness. And I thought it was really interesting how all the points that you gave in the message really kind of honed in on what is God's game plan for the church,
right,
as he's talking through 1 Peter. So is that just something that you saw, or how did that title
definitely
come together?
The original title was Hope and Holiness, right? Like giving us hope and holiness.
Yeah.
And then as I started to go through it more and more, I actually started to see steps that we could take and kind of how God was breaking it down.
Yeah.
Just steps we could take to get to this idea, because holiness isn't just living apart. It's practical holiness is what Peter's talking about.
Right.
Because in the time that it was written, the Christians were going through extreme persecution. And so it would have been easy for them to flee and just set up little enclaves, Christian enclaves, and they could just do life separate.
Yeah.
But that's not what Christ asked them to do. He wanted them to be involved in their culture so they could be an agent of change. Mm-hmm. And so then it becomes not this holiness of being set apart, but in our cultural context, how do we become practically, or how do we practice our holiness?
Right.
And so that's the whole idea. And I really strongly feel like this section, it breaks down the steps we can take in order to start to live out our faith, because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to say things and do the opposite just because that's our human nature and we're not perfect.
Yeah.
But if we read the Bible, we believe what it says, and we take it as God's instructions for us on how to live a better life, not just a set of rules that we have to follow, then it's going to lead us to practical holiness. We're going to be living out our faith, and that's what's going to lead people to Christ.
Yeah. As you're saying all of that, it reminds me of your first point that you said, don't be afraid to be weird.
Yeah.
And that is so true. But we are so, as humans, as Americans, we don't want to break outside of the cultural norm.
Right.
But other exiles that I think of are Daniel and his friends.
Yes.
That they were weird.
Yep.
In that exile situation.
Yep.
That they were not doing all the things that they were expected to do.
And why were they persecuted? Because they were living differently from what they were expected to do. Right. And then God was blessing them.
Yes.
And so
and then the other people around them noticed, hey, you may be weird, but it's working. Like there is something there.
Correct.
And so do you feel like Peter is encouraging for the same reason?
100%. 100%. I've always raised my kids and I live my life like being normal, doing the cultural norm. It's boring. Like that's why be normal when God created you to be great.
Right.
And so I really do believe that the best way that people are going to come to Christ is through relational connection. And then they're going to see how you live differently, how you interpret things differently, how you deal with adversity, how you deal with pain and hurt and struggle. And then in that, they're going to say, wow, like I might not agree with everything that Rob stands for, but there's something to it because it's not just words. He's actually living it out. And he has this hope that goes beyond understanding. Yeah.
And then I feel like that kind of leads into the second point of practicing like you play.
Yeah.
Now, I understand from a sports context that, you don't want to waste the time that you're practicing by holding back. You want to be able to go full force so that way whenever there's a competition, you're ready to go.
Right.
So you feel like that's more like us as Christians here in the church? Is that our practice time? Or where would you say our practice time is?
That's great. I would say that our whole life, in my opinion, would be our practice time. Because if our game time, if we take the express purpose of what Peter's doing is he's encouraging us to live differently, to act differently, so that more people can come to Christ. Then if we're practicing like we play, we're getting the coaching through the Bible, we're getting the coaching through sermons, we're getting our coaching through different avenues of discipleship. Then when we go out, into our mission field, which is our everyday lives. It's where we work. It's where we play.
Yeah.
That's really where we get to practice what we've learned. And so practice, I think, happens in our daily devotions. But it's also, I think, practice, part of it is who we are when no one else is around. It's easy to play. It's easy to play the game at church. I'm here for a couple hours a week, and so I'm going to put on a face and a mask. But if you can be authentically you in front of other people, I think that gives, even when we don't have it all together, I think that gives what we say about our faith, how we live out our faith, it gives it more credibility and more power and more weight behind it.
Yeah, great. And then I just want to hone in on the last point that you had, be the teammate you want.
Yeah.
And I understand this concept as well, maybe even in school, like if you've been in a group project, you don't want to be that person, even though that might have been you, Rob.
That was me. I'm so sorry for those people out there.
But you want people on your team or on your group project to be able to do all their efforts to be able to come together. So in a Christian sense, in the Christian analogy, you talked about being able to love one another and being the team player in the Christian faith as well. Is there any more that you have encouragement for that? I feel like that's a great point.
Yeah, I just think for like practical love, in essence, it's authentic, it's genuine, it's sacrificial, and so sometimes what we have to sacrifice is our own, just our own sense of right. Right. For the sake of the church, for the sake of relationship, we might feel like we're justified and we have every right to feel this way against another person. And so naturally what we do is we tend to just separate ourselves. Yeah. Right. But Christian community is one of the methods that God reaches other people. And so if we as a church don't look different to societal norms, which would cause broken relationships to just drift apart. But if we disagree fundamentally on politics, if we disagree fundamentally on certain things about Scripture and about Christianity, and yet we can still come together and we can still love one another and we can still want each other's betterment. It's not the romantic love or the agape love, because we'll never get agape love, but it is this love of caring for one another, wanting what's best for that person, and then sacrificing specific needs of our own in order to further that relationship and to, in a lot of times, just reconcile. Yeah. I think one of the hallmarks of a healthy church is that not that you don't go through difficulties or possible splits or anything like that, but in those circumstances where it's difficult to do, you keep Christ at the center of that, and you realize we're called to be ministers of reconciliation. I mean, God's in the business of reconciling a lost world to himself. And so if we're supposed to live our life based off that example, then our relationships should reflect that aspect of God's character, and we should reconcile, even if like there was hurt and harm and in whatever area. But that's just be the change that you want to be. You know, if we want to set up a tight community here at King Street Church, it starts with reconciliation, and then it starts with doing life together. And so the way that you do that is just by being the change that you want to see. Yeah.
Wow, that's so great. Yeah, love. Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you, and also forgive one another as you have been forgiven much. So those are two really great, strong biblical truths. Yep. Thank you so much. Yeah. All right. Hopefully you were encouraged. Thanks for spending a few minutes here with us. Thanks again, Pastor Rob. Yep. And we hope you have a great rest of your week.
Have a good one.